Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Canadian Missing Project, copyrighted edition for a video channel. And this is a special edition. We were talking about Skinwalker Ranch. I did a review of Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. I'm going to do a review today. First one on my top three, one of my top three famous all-time best books I've ever read. And I don't mind telling you that. It is The Hunt for Skinwalker by Colm, Kelleher, George Knapp. This is the book that started it all on Skinwalker Ranch. And we're going to get into it. First of all, where is Skinwalker Ranch? I think it's important. I'm going to explain this to you in detail. So, the ranch is located at the far northeast corner of Utah. Right near the Colorado border, right near the Wyoming border. Now, what a lot of people don't know is just east of Meeker and a little bit north is a place called Yampa, Y-A-M-P-A. And then, which is about 70 miles from the ranch. And then just northeast of the ranch is a place called Rock Springs, Wyoming. Now, in the near future, you're going to become very well accustomed to hearing about Rock Springs. And there's a lot of strange things that go around that city. And I'll explain that to you in the future here coming up. But it was important to understand it's just 70 miles northeast of the ranch. And why is Yampa important? When I was in Colorado, I met a man and his wife, the most stable individuals you'll ever meet. And they saw a Bigfoot when they were turkey hunting in Yampa. He came back dumbfounded. And he said, "Dave, I can't believe it." Well, why is that important? Well, first of all, he was one of the most stable guys you'd ever want to meet. So, as far as credibility and integrity, a 10. The Rock Springs connection, you're going to understand it better in the coming months, but I will tell you that the connection to Skinwalker Ranch, which was made by George Knapp, to my work, starts to become more clear when you understand this. Now, when The Hunt for Skinwalker first came out, I knew it was going to be a good book because George Knapp is a great writer. And it came out in 2005. It's been out for a while. But when I read it, I immediately read it again, and it had been years before I did that with any book. When you get a man like Colm Kelleher, who's 100% science-based individual facts, that's running the National Institute of Discovery of Sciences, and he sits down with a guy like George to write a book, you've got a winner. So, now that you kind of understand where the ranch is at, let's get a little more up close and personal. So, here's a close-up view of where the ranch is located. So this is Fort Duchesne, Utah. This is Bottle Hollow Reservoir. And here's the ranch. The reservoir is less than a mile from the ranch. There's bodies of water and major creeks that almost encircle the ranch. There's a creek that runs through the ranch, creek to the north, or a creek to the east, creek to the west, and a reservoir. Water almost completely surrounds it. For being in the middle of the desert, I think that's a pretty important piece of geography. When George first told me about the ranch, one of the first questions I ever asked him, is there any water nearby? He said, yeah, funny you asked that. Less than a mile away is Bottle Hollow Reservoir. So, here's the way I'm going to get into it with you. I'm not going to go chapter 1 through 30. I'm going to skip around and hit some high points in this book that really define where it might take us. So, in the book, they talk about other locations that have similar instances that occur to the ranch. Well, one was the Yakima Indian Reservation. Now, this is something I knew about back when I was on Hoopa. The reservation's 2,800 square miles. It's a UFO hotspot. It's a Bigfoot hotspot. And the stuff's been seen by police officers, ranchers, government employees, etc. Well, and then these two men go on and talk about a family of 4 that lives on the reservation on a ranch. And they're growing corn. And they had seen lights above the cornfield that couldn't be explained. Then they had poltergeist type activity that occurred around them regularly. When they moved to the property in '66, they had no idea what they were getting into. They had tools and other things disappear. They had knives that came by them in the air and stuck in walls. They found flying balls of light, orbs. And when they were interviewed about this, they thought that whatever was causing this reacted to their emotional state. Which goes to the point I've talked to you guys before, that sometimes I think that whatever this entity is, it's gauging or watching our response. And maybe it's to see how we do respond. Maybe that's what this is all about. But that was one area in the world that they talked about that had activity similar to Skinwalker. The other place was a Colorado property that was in Elbert County. Population 22,254 for the whole county. Mostly ranchers, farmers, no military bases. El Paso County is the next county over, and they have 3 military bases. Now, why is this property important? This one's a good one. So, when I lived in Colorado, this is Denver up here. I lived way out on the western range in a city called Morrison. Well, if you go south on 25, which is a complete chaos these days, way down here is a place called Cheyenne Mountain. And there's a huge military base down here. But in Elbert County, where this incident I'm going to talk to you about happened, it's way out here in the middle of nowhere, not a lot going on. But you guys all know what Cheyenne Mountain is? It's a location that I always wanted to tour. I never could get in, but they have doors that are 20 feet thick that seal this mountain in. And it's where they control North American airspace. And it's where all of our electronics are that watch everything that moves near us. It's quite a fascinating place. There's also a giant reservoir in the mountain so that people could live there for decades. They have stored away water, food, everything. So once they seal that door, let's say that there's a nuclear threat, can't get through it. And it's interesting that that happens to be very near the county that we're going to talk about. So the person that purchases this property that was actually vacant for years and years and years, he was a former U.S. Air Force security officer. So he buys the property, moves his family onto it. It's not near any military base, but right away they start hearing electric humming. They couldn't tell where it was coming from. And then they started to see UFOs, and then they figured out the UFO is emitting this humming sound. At one point they saw, in their words, a whole fleet of UFOs land on their property. And then in the middle of the night they heard real heavy footsteps. In October of 1975, they found a mutilated cow, and then a couple days later their kids were coming out of the woods Then they had to go back for another reason, and as they were coming out, they found these giant human-like footprints following them out of the woods. That's not good. Then they had a second mutilation of a cow, and the owner, again, a former Air Force security guy, so he's thinking like I'm thinking. He goes to the sheriff, and the sheriff says, well, I wish we could do something about it, but it's a pretty regular occurrence out here. We've had a lot of them. And the ranchers said that the sheriff told him that it was his thoughts that it was ET related. Then a few months later, a large, hairy humanoid chased their family into a house. Their house. Then the rancher saw actually one of these things near the corral, shot it. No blood, but he reported electric beeping sounds and a strange kind of whine immediately afterwards. The family reported that sometimes they'd be ready to go to sleep and they would feel paralyzed, like they couldn't move in their beds. And then they also reported floating orbs and type things in their house. They also reported certain entities or beings being in the house. Then one night they had some friends over and they were listening to some music, and then in the middle of the music a voice comes over and it says, "We've allowed you to stay. Do not cause us to take action against you." Well, the person who was in the house with the family when this was happening was an electronics expert, and he took it apart trying to figure out what happened. How could this be? How could this be emitting a male sound like it was a recording? And the expert was baffled. Well, in January 77, the owner of this property in Colorado had an impulse to go to the top of the hill, with this nearby hill, with his oldest son. Went with him. And they get there and they see an area, a circle area, about 35 feet in diameter, that's charred. And as they're there, in a nearby tree, they see it like a yellowish light. And as they get closer, there's this humming sound coming from this metallic box and this yellow light. And the closer they got, the louder the hum sound got. So the rancher walks his son back to their vehicle, comes back, and the box and the humming sound, they're gone. Well, he told his a deputy law enforcement friend, and the deputy stated that, yeah, they actually had encountered something identical to this, and when they returned, the box and the tree were gone. So later that night, the rancher goes back to that area again to see maybe it came back, and he sees two, as he describes, effeminate men with blonde hair and large eyes, tight-fitting suits, with a flying saucer on the ground near him. And the rancher says that just in the shadows, away from the flying saucer, was a Bigfoot. He said that these ET types spoke in perfect English and stated, "How nice of you to come." The rancher said that the aliens told the Bigfoot to do certain things, and it did it. Huge implication, folks. Huge implication. These ET types told them that they wouldn't tamper with the memory of them. And then later that night, when the rancher came home and told his wife, he thought that this might be some type of military special operations group or something, because it was so bizarre. And the reason that made some sense is that the rancher told him that the family had seen military-type helicopters flying over their fields regularly. But he thought that the helicopters he saw were too small to carry some of the large cows that were mutilated. He said upon the second mutilation, he calls the colonel at a local military base and asks him about the helicopters and the mutilated cows. He said that the colonel told him that the UFOs have compromised their own security at the base. And he also admitted to Bigfoot sightings on the base. Now, it appeared as though the writer believed what this person was saying. But if you really think that a colonel reaches his position in the military because he toes the line, what he just did was absolutely blow every regulation for a colonel in the military to talk to civilians about top secret type things right out of the ground. But the whole point of this is there are other places in the world that have had incidents on an ongoing basis very similar to Skinwalker Ranch. So Knapp and Kelleher ask a good question. What would be the point to scare this one rancher farmer family in the middle of nowhere, Colorado? And it goes back to, is it possible that these entities are studying our reaction to what they're doing? Seeing how far they could push us. Seeing how far they could go before somebody gives up and leaves. Well, in '79, this family sold their ranch. And there was some theory that the military maybe wanted the property. Both the Utah, this is really important, both the Utah ranch and the Colorado ranch, Skinwalker Ranch and this ranch I'm just telling you about, had been vacant for 4 years. No, I'm sorry, for years prior to the ranchers moving in. So, is there something like a nesting time that's needed for whatever these entities are to come establish themselves without anybody on the property? It's one similarity. Let's talk about what happened at Skinwalker Ranch after NIDS start to become involved. As of July 1997, there was no scientific data collected to date at Skinwalker. They installed 6 security cameras. The areas were specifically chosen to look at the sky and the ground in areas that they've had major incidents happen in. Some of those cameras were infrared. 1 year passed from the data installation and nothing was picked up by a camera. Now, for all of you Bigfootaholics out there, gee, it's kind of like a game camera in Bigfoot, isn't it? People have asked me who have had lengthy interactions with a Bigfoot when they've had enough. They go, Dave, what do we do? What do we do? You do 2 things. You put up big floodlights around the house, put up game cameras in the woods around, and all of a sudden, all activity will stop. True. So we go to July 20th, 1998. The rancher on the Skinwalker property viewed that 3 of the 4 cameras stopped working. He went out and he looked at the cameras, and they were on poles, and all of the cameras had the coaxial cable pulled out of the poles and from the ground. 3 other cameras were still working. The 3 cameras that were pulled out, the cords were pulled out, were 15 feet off the ground. Each was facing a different direction, and each had PVC tubing protecting the cable inside. when the scientists went out and looked to understand why these cameras stopped working, they found the PVC tubing bent and twisted at the bottom of the pole. At the bottom of the pole, there was a copious amount of duct tape taped around that juncture, and all of the duct tape was gone. They never found it, but it was meticulously unwound some way. So they review the timing on, let me explain this. When you have a big system like this, it all gets recorded onto a hard drive. You can look on that hard drive and you can see second by second what's happening at any point. You can skip around. It's really easy and fun to use, actually. Well, they have 6 cameras there, 3 stopped working, and the 3 that lost power, they all lost power simultaneously at 8:30 p.m. this one night. So the 3 cameras had been vandalized and their coaxial cable pulled out at the juncture at the base. So the NIDS guys go out and they say, oh, this is pretty cool, because the 3 that are still operating must have caught something on the other poles because they were in the field of view of each one. Bingo, we'll get a suspect. And the suspect should be in plain view because the entire pole is in plain view. So they get the video footage and they pay to have it specially enhanced because they want to see every detail. Well, they can see the light on the camera on, and then 8:30, all 3 of them simultaneously go off. So they're looking at the bottom of the pole. They don't see anything. No suspect was seen, and it had to be, in the words of Colm and Kelleher, fastidious work to take the tape off, pull the cable out, and break the juncture. But nothing's seen. Now, one thing, I've stated this before, and I'll say it again here. One thing that neither book talks about, and none of their scientists want to talk about it, is the suspension of time and space. What would happen if, let's say, a Bigfoot is directed by the aliens to go out there into that field and pull all of that cable out and break and then get out of there? They suspend time and space. The Bigfoot goes in, rips all the cords out, blah, 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 leaves. They reactivate time and space. Nothing's missed. Nothing's seen. Just everything goes down. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just saying, what if? So we're still back at the ranch. April 1999. The ranch manager is coming back after running errands, and he sees a cloud of dust. He and his wife see horses running around inside their corral, making a whole bunch of dust, and they're super agitated. And they see a reddish blur in the center of the corral. Now, if you guys have never been on a ranch, don't understand, ranchers, their livestock is their life. They love it like you love your kids. And the manager that was at the ranch at this time did not own the ranch. He had already sold it to Mr. Bigelow. But he was still running his livestock off of it. So he sees some reddish blur. He described it not as a dog, kind of in the shape of a hyena, heavily muscled, and to him it appeared as though it was hunting the horses. He said it would regularly lunge at the legs of the horses as they were running around. Said it had a big red bushy tail, kind of a head of a dog, short stubby legs, kind of like a hog, and it was about 200 pounds, and he said it was not a wolf. And that was about the best description that he could give. So the rancher and the wife pull up, and he's agitated. He's really mad. He jumps out of the truck. The creature jumps out of the corral and starts going in an opposite direction from where he came in on. And he said he ran around the side of the corral and he watched the creature run and just disappear into nothingness. So, we've had these discussions many times. If a portal was random, then there would be times we would see exactly what that rancher saw. We would see people just walking down the street randomly disappear in front of us, but we never do. But if there was constructed intelligence behind the portals opening and closing, and there was a threat to, let's say, one of their test animals, say this thing was a test animal, and the rancher, he felt that this thing was going to be threatened by the rancher, threatened to be shot or something, then portal opens up, this thing disappears. So all this was happening in April of 99. Well, Mr. Bigelow bought the property in August 96. And through August 96 through March 97, there really wasn't much activity. But they convinced the rancher to stay on board and kind of manage the stock and the ranch at the same time. Now remember, keeping stock on the ranch is like a biological test center. It's like a petri dish. They can see what happens. Yeah, and some people would say, well, that's pretty cruel, Dave. Watch the cows get mutilated, watch things die. Yeah, it is. It's pretty brutal. Don't know what to say, but I'm afraid that I would probably be doing the same thing if I was the head or the lead scientist. So, May 1997. The unexplained phenomena at the ranch started to come back again. And it always came back in a flurry when the scientists came back on the property. One of the physicists saw a ball of light and telepathically got message sent to him when he saw that ball of light. Then in August of 97, there was a red ball of light. Now, it didn't discuss in the segment I read what the telepathic message was. But I think that's interesting. Did the entity at the ranch lose interest in NIDS? Did NIDS push too hard? Did they leave stones unturned? Oh yeah, they did. And they never excavated at the ranch. They never dug down to see what's down there. I never saw them use side scanning radar to look what's down beneath the earth. I think that's a big faux pas, or maybe they did and they didn't want to release the information. Now, towards the end of the chapter on other strange locations, they talked about San Luis Valley in Colorado. Yeah, San Luis Valley. The #1 UFO hotspot in North America, the San Luis Valley. True. There's a national park there called Sand Dunes National Park. It's in the middle of a desert. But there's UFO activity everywhere out there. And why is this all important? Well, first of all, I encourage you all to go there because it's a fascinating place. I wrote a story about a young boy who disappeared on the sand dunes. And it's in the books, Missing 411 books. And it's one of the more phenomenal stories I've ever written about that area of the world. Now, sand dunes is this huge pile of sand in the middle of nowhere. It makes no sense how it got there, where it got there, where it came from. Now, I've talked to people before who have lived out there, who have talked to National Park Service people, who have done drilling segments through the sand down into the ground. There's some theories that the sand has been there for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. One big problem. When they drilled, at the point the sand ends and the earth begins, they found leafy vegetable matter that wasn't thousands and thousands of years old. Nobody can adequately answer where all this sand came from. There's been some people that have made claims that the sand is a result of specialized drilling and specialized ET activity at drilling out some of the base of the mountains in that area. The one that's named all the time is one called Mount Blanca, Blanca. But it is pretty suspicious that there's tons of UFO activity. There's a very unusual missing person from that area. Yeah. And then the second location that they talked about that was pretty unusual was Sedona, Arizona. Now, I tend to agree with Sedona. It's the only place where a U.S. Forest Service employee disappeared and was never found that I know of. Now, he was off duty, but he disappeared on a hike and was never found. And for Sedona, I don't understand that. 1%. Again, the story's in my books. But the point of what I'm trying to get you going here with is that Kelleher and Knapp attempted to throw an umbrella over the number of areas in North America that also had similar occurrences to Skinwalker Ranch. And I appreciate this because they could have gone the cheap route and just said, oh, it's so unusual at this one site. There's no other site like this in the world. They didn't do that. They actually went above and beyond to show that there were other areas that had this activity. And then today, I told you about some of the actual activity at these two different locations. And I would say it's quite unusual. Now, I don't think when they first wrote this book 17 years ago that they ever thought that it was going to, it was 2005 this book was copyrighted, that they ever thought that they'd be coming out with a second book. But again, I'm going to go into more detail as we move forward. The importance of what was done here is that Mr. Bigelow hired an absolute crack team of scientists, theologists, retired FBI, special forces people to go out there and record what was happening. And as the front of the book says, science confronts the unexplained at a remote ranch in Utah. But friends, that remote ranch has a lot of strange things that have happened in fairly close proximity to it that I'm going to connect the dots for you in a way that's going to blow your mind. And that's for the future. But for my first sticking my toe in the water on this book. This is what I wanted to touch base with you on, tell you what's coming, and read you just the back cover of the book. I won't read you anything inside because it's not fair. Back cover's open game. For more than 50 years, the bizarre events at a remote Utah ranch have ranged from the perplexing to the wholly terrifying. Vanishing and mutilated cattle, unidentified flying objects, the appearance of huge otherworldly creatures, invisible objects emitting magnetic fields with the power to spark a cattle stampede, flying orbs of light with dazzling maneuverability and lethal consequences. For one family, life on Skinwalker Ranch had become a life under siege by an unknown enemy of enemies. Nothing else could explain the horrors that surrounded them. Perhaps science could. Leading a first-class team of research scientists on a disturbing odyssey into the unknown, Colm and Kelleher spent hundreds of days and nights on Skinwalker property and experienced firsthand many of the haunting mysteries. With investigative reporter George Knapp, the only journalist allowed to witness and document the team's work, Kelleher chronicles in superb detail the spectacular happenings the team observed personally and the theories of modern physics behind the phenomena. Far from the coldly detached findings one might expect, their conclusions are utterly hair-raising in their implications. Opening a door to the unseen world around us, the hunt for Skinwalker is a clarion call to expand our vision beyond what we know. Pair of you pocket books available at Amazon. And more of these chapters are to come in the future. Thanks for being here. Paulides out.